Welcome, everybody. My name is Dale Ozo. I'm going to present to you today the cybersecurity best practices. And what I like to do is I like to pause on this main screen here because this really represents, for me, what cybersecurity is and what that is. And I'll kind of describe that picture for you a little bit, why I believe that. So it's because, as you see there, the cybersecurity is not just a destination that says just to get you there, do the things you need to do, and then it's done. It's basically a journey. And so this graphic really, when I saw that, what was put on this slide here, that it really hit me is that that's really what cybersecurity is. We're always constantly looking at, working through and getting ready for the next things that need to be handled and need to be done. So it's a continuous review and improvement. And so today's presentation, I'm going to be going through and actually highlighting some of those items for you as well. So again, I just wanted to pause on that because I really like that graphic screen there. So as I mentioned earlier, just a bit ago, I'm Dale Lozo. I'm a senior manager here at Eide Bailly, part of the cybersecurity, one of cybersecurity leader and senior leader for this. I want to just let you know that I've got over 35 years of experience in the IT industry. I've worked for companies such as EDS, General Motors, HP, Xerox Services Conduit. Not that I jumped from lots and lots of those companies, it's that a lot of these were from mergers and acquisitions. And then during that 35 years, 25 of that has been specifically just in leadership roles and responsibilities for clients in their environments in support of their technologies and their business needs. And of that 25 years, 20 of that has been specifically just in the realm of security. And so I've held the dubious honor of being Chief Information Officer for several different of our clients that I was supporting, as well as Chief Information Security Officer for the client, which was the California State Department of Healthcare Services for Medicaid services. Kind of proud of that. Did that for 5 years. And it was 15.6 million recipients of Medicaid services that I was fully responsible for all the securing of all their information, from not only the virtual world of the security infrastructures, but also the physical side of it as well. 1,800 people on campus and so forth. So during that tenure, I was recruited by lots of different companies to come to work for them. Eventually, what I did was I went over and started working for a company by the name of Cylance. And so I worked there for a couple of years, and they were acquired by BlackBerry. But in that tenure, in that 3-year time period, I held the position of Virtual Chief Information Security Officer and Virtual CIO. So what I did is a lot of the work that I was doing as a CISO. I was actually doing that for a lot of different clients. And so I was reporting to their assigned and reporting to their board of directors. A lot of times I actually became part of their executive organization. Many times I also just helped mentor newer Chief Information Security Officers that just were joining those companies. So I actually came in and helped mentor them out. But the highlight of really what I was doing during that time frame of the thing that I really enjoyed, I guess, the most was that I was actually involved in a lot of the clients that were under the contracts with support for their incident responses when they were having their moments of being attacked. And while they were being attacked, we had a lot of team members from our squad come in and actually help them get through and figure out what was happening. But also they grabbed me, pulled me in, and actually help them go through and understand what they had to do from leadership. Not only strategic type of initiatives that had to then occur, but what had to happen immediately with their executive organizations and what they were going to have to communicate, how they're going to handle dealing with the ransomware, how they're going to handle with the FBI and other agencies that needed to get involved in the situation. And also to help, I guess, giving a little bit of a firm shoulder to help several of them that realized that this was going to, if this was ever to get out, that this situation was going to actually cause them to lose their career. So helping them get through that, figuring out what we're going to do, how to move forward. And I can say I was very successful in doing that for, like I said, over 3 years. And so I was also tapped on the shoulder by some Eide Bailly professionals here that wanted for me to come over and help out with rolling in the cybersecurity stuff. So I'm here. I'm happy to be here. And I'm looking forward to continuously providing everybody the best information possible and all of our clients to get to that next level to and assurance that we actually are going to help them make sure that their things aren't going to happen to them. So anyways, kind of a winded introduction, but at least want to kind of give you a feel for my background, give you a background where I'm coming from. Moving on, so here's what I'm going to cover in the next hour ish. I'm not gonna go clear to the end of the hour, but I want to make sure I get as much information out to you as possible for within this hour for your CPEs as well. But I'm going to cover the cybersecurity landscape. I'm also going to cover the effects of what happens during cyber attacks. And then also I'm going to go roll through some of the best practices for creating a culture for cybersecurity. So starting off, cybersecurity landscape. So the thing here on this slide is that this is pretty much a definition of what you will find when you talk about what is cybersecurity. And so what I wanted to highlight there is that what this really is that it depicts a malicious actor. What they're going to do is they're going to try to disrupt your network monitor. They're going to monitor and steal your data. And they're also looking to ransom your critical assets for financial gains. And part of that also is that what they're going to do is they're going to look to see what they can do to disrupt your business, and then potentially for political means. And so it's not always that they're just looking just to go through and just take the money and run. It may also just to see what they can do to take down your reputation and whatever services you may be offering as well, based upon some political agenda that may be something that somebody's out there that doesn't agree with something with the company. The other item there is that cybersecurity is overwhelming and continuously increasing in complexity. And part of that is cyber attacks that continue to come in. And I saw many of these that were coming in the forms of ransomware. There are many types of different ransomware attacks and that are out there, and as well as there's many different actors and groups that are using ransomware as a means for financial gain as well for the agendas that they have. Phishing attacks, that's also something we've probably heard a lot about through email phishing and also through other means. Some are even using voice by calling in and trying to impersonate in some method to try and get you to do something that you normally would potentially do, but you're not knowing that that's actually an attacker that's asking you to do something for some method of political gains, or I'm sorry, so financial gains or something. We've also seen a lot of man in the middle. This is a little more direct attacks. These are ones that come in that are getting into your infrastructure, and what they're doing is they're watching how operations are going from one system to another system, and they're looking for being in the middle of that to be able to intercept the transactions that are going on, and they're monitoring and recording them. And then once you've stopped those transactions, what they then do is they can then go back in and replay them. They may be able to capture your passwords, your user accounts, and at that point they can then replay that and actually reestablish a link once again back to the say the financial institution that you're connected with, and at that point they can then manipulate your account. Also, denial of service is another big one. So this is where there's a lot of Internet of Things, or IoT, or devices, or computers that are trying to do what they can to disrupt the traffic that goes normally to your web services that you may be providing to your clients, or your inventory that you're trying to sell to the out there onto the internet. They're going to do what they can to flood that system, and either to shut it down or get it to reboot, maybe try and gain access to it. But either way, they're just trying to get your customers to become frustrated enough to not go to your site to purchase something, but instead they'll go to another site, instead maybe your competitor site, in order to buy whatever goods they're looking for. So again, real kind of a light touch there on kind of describing what a denial of service is on that. These are some of the headlines that we've seen in recent times for, whoops, sorry, backed up. There we go. So these are some of the recent headlines that are out there. And so what we're seeing is that, so what these illustrate as far as these headlines is that many of these are tied to a type of ransomware attack. which is the more common and more expensive and more persistent and sophisticated that's happening right now. The attack sophistications that they're looking for, or they have been performing, are really attacks that they've been doing against the supply chain attacks. They've been able to infiltrate trusted software firms that we've trusted in the IT industry for quite a long time, and finding a way of actually including some level of malware into that trusted software company. And then during the software company's standard types of release of updates, lo and behold, their malware was also included in that release. And that was then set out to all the different clients that were out there that used that tool. And at that point, they were susceptible to backdoor accesses into their infrastructure as part of what was uncovered. And what I'm describing there is what occurred during the SolarWinds attack, which was last year time period. There are also lots of different targeted ransomware attacks. They're doing some levels of hacking and pen testing type things, and to get into the infrastructure. So once they're in, they're looking to see what they can do to take out. And at that point, they bring up the ransomware to you. Also, the means of how they're getting into it. I mentioned earlier about the phishing, but they're also doing what we also call smishing and vishing. So it's your text messages. They also tried to do it that way through your texting, to send you something into a ability to go through and click on a link or go to do some levels of actions. And so then the other thing I want to kind of mention there is that with all just those phishing, vishing, and smishing, is that really the people that are the greatest threats there, and as far as the targets of what these attackers are doing in order to try and gain access to your infrastructure. The other area of growing attack surfaces are the Internet of Things. So there's a lot of things that have been popping up over the past decade or so that are needing to gain access to your Wi-Fi network, such as like your smart thermostats. Those came up in the last couple of years, and so they'll then put themselves into your wireless network, but they also there's a possibility of being able to remotely control those devices and get them to do things like participate in a denial of service kind of attack. Some of the other things we're seeing out there, other attack surfaces they're looking to attack, are your cell phones, potentially your smart watches, washing machines, cameras. So some of these are the ones that have also been seen in the media, in the journals and blogs around how folks have been successful in being able to manipulate those types of devices to do something other than what they were originally designed to do for you. Then we also have like weak passwords, lack of password enforcements that are going on, making it easier for exploitation. Some of those devices I kind of outlined there is that they still require a user account and password to get onto those little devices. And a lot of times that they will then, the maker or designer of that device may just use a default one admin password, and the password may be password 123 or something like that. And so it becomes very well known and very easy and very common for once that device has been identified by an attacker, is to quickly go and find out what potentially the default password is and user account, and then they can then at that point potentially gain access to that. And then also looks like we've got a little polling question that just popped in, so good timing there. So if you have an opportunity to jump on there and provide that, then go right ahead and get that rolling. I'll just keep rolling here with this. The thing I also want to mention is that also we've also saw a lot of stuff with even with COVID. So being we all had to rush to our homes, many of the companies that are out there were not very well prepared for being able to expand the need for the security for now what was going to include everyone's home infrastructure of their own home wireless network, or their home own networks, and how are we going to now protect those end devices that they now have to run on those. So they have also become an area where the attackers are looking at using that as a mechanism in getting in, which is basically your vulnerability of your home networks. And it could be anywhere from a set of devices you may have on your infrastructure that if you have teenagers and they happen to be playing video games or other types of things, they've got their devices and they're doing the thing they have. But if suddenly there was a means for an attacker to basically go through and gain access to that device, well, now that they've got a foothold on your infrastructure inside your house, and now you fire up your corporate company laptop machine, and if not the proper protection is on that machine, then potentially it is now a target and can be identified or seen on the home network. And I'll give that opportunity for that attacker to move over to that device and do something maliciously while you are just still in the process of even connecting up to a VPN or other kind of connections point. So something to be also aware of that, which is why corporate companies are looking to push it down the level of virus detection and other kinds of products and systems that are out there to assist in making sure we've got the ability to detect those things and prevent those things from happening. All right, so those are some of the items that headlines I wanted to show up there for you. And the next slide here, trends in cybersecurity. So we've got basically some things that are happening in the overall industry, which may also affect in your industries as well, which is basically a talent shortage. We are very well been noting that for quite a long time now, that in the realm of just cybersecurity, it happens to be the fastest growing career areas in the U.S. So that's what was quoted from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And some of the numbers I got from them, I went out there just this morning to go check to make sure that these numbers were still accurate, and which they were, which is 2 out of 3 cybersecurity roles remain unfilled to this day. And there's roughly about 3 million unfilled cybersecurity positions in 2021, as reported by Forbes. So it's a big thing. It's a big crisis, and we're doing everything we can do to one, to help train or help provide education to a lot of our young kids in through the schools to get them prepared for these kinds of careers, and then also mentoring many of the team folks, getting them also ready for taking on these roles and positions. The other one is ransomware, and I kind of touched on it a couple times. Again, ransomware, more common, more expensive, and more persistent and sophisticated. That's really the biggest things around the ransomware right now that I could share with as far as cybersecurity stuff goes, without going into a really long detail to kind of show you everything that actually how it all happens, and which could be another course, or could be another topic I could talk about another time. Attack sophistication. I mentioned a little bit about supply chains that are going on there. That was when I mentioned about the solar winds, but also there's still also targeted attacks going on. And again, I talked about a little bit of phishing and smishing on that. The growing attack surface, talked about that a little bit for you. And also, the one thing I didn't mention is that what I want to show there is that at least described in there, is that in the growing attack surface, that also includes what are called SCADA devices, which SCADA is supervisory control and data acquisition. All right, kind of a crazy word, but really what that refers to is industrial control systems, or otherwise known as ICS systems. Now, that's a lot of quick little acronyms and buzzwords that are out there, but really when we talk about ICS and SCADA devices, if you're not in that industry, what these are used to control your infrastructure. So the infrastructure processes like water treatment plants, wastewater, treatment for that, gas pipelines, wind farms, etc. So those are some of the things that are devices that are in that level of infrastructure that are also right now somewhat, some of them are vulnerable, but basically they're looked at as being targets. And there's also facility-based things that are in there as well. So we find those types of devices that are in airports, some of the space stations, ships, shipping across the oceans, et cetera, are all industrial control systems that are out there. And then also you'll find those kinds of devices that are running in production plants, manufacturing plants, refinery type things, power generation, et cetera. So I just want to kind of highlight that there's definitely also a scope there that we're all looking at too in the cybersecurity industry, that there's another area where we're concentrating a lot of our time to do that. The other one is insider threats. Some of the insider threat type things are as there's been a rise in that, and many companies are concerned with keeping the outsiders, threat actors, from breaching their network. So I see a lot of that they're really diligent about the perimeter, but they're not focused on what's happening internally, looking for the possibilities of threats that are may be already on your inside of your infrastructure, or in a rare situation, you may have an employee that may be disgruntled, that has the abilities to do certain things, and may decide to do something that potentially could cause issues with you in your organization. So you should be looking at what kinds of things you should have put in place for that. Some of the recommendation we give out of at the beginning of that, before any of that situations would occur with a disgruntled employee, was that we push the concept of what's called zero trust and least privileged accesses. So just make sure that the minimal amount of accesses is granted to the folks to do specifically the job that they need to do. And if they were to move from a position to another position in your company, that you are then at that point removing that privileged accesses that they may have if it's not something they need in the next position they're handling. So making sure you clean up what they currently have before you move them to the area, and then grant them what they need for the next area of responsibilities. And let's see what else. So also the monitoring and testing is a very key important thing to make sure that you're doing the things you need to do for monitoring and testing, for your networking, for insider threat vulnerabilities as necessary. So that way you're making sure that the machines and the systems are currently running at the highest peak level of performance. All right, let's move on to next section. We're going to go into the effects of cyber attack. What I'm representing here on this slide is a little more of a dive to the methodology that attackers are using. And they're pretty much from different traits of attackers, from an individual to a group of folks that are going to do something to a state-sponsored type of attack, which we've kind of heard from these countries that have sponsored some of these groups of attackers. But they pretty much go through this same pattern. What they do is they start off by recon. They pull information together. They're looking to see what really is out there, and gathering information together. And it may just be very generic. They may just be doing scans out there on the internet and looking for any devices that may answer back as the type of vulnerability that is, not knowing specifically what company that device is, but they're just gathering, just looking to pull information together. And at that point, what they're going to do is they're going to look at, those are the ones that are maybe of interest, that we might want to put those together as far as servers and systems that we just saw that were vulnerable, and go to look to potentially exploit them. And that moves you to the next area, which is where they're looking at saying, here's how can I exploit those systems that are out there. But not only that, they're going to start pulling together the company profile. They may look at social media. They may look at different things that are out there that can quickly help you identify what that possibility is and the ways of exploiting it. It could be that they may look at some recent events that you're going through as your company that you may be announcing, to which they may go through and decide that this is a good opportunity for us to get in the middle of that confusion, such as a merger and acquisition, that there's potentially two kinds of financial organizations that are going to have, for two different companies, they're going to have to blend together, and they're not really going to know which is which and who's who. And what they might just do is they might get into some method of getting into the middle of that, say via an email exploit, where they can get access to credentials to your email account. And at that point, they may impersonate the opportunity there to ask that the new financial person, who may not know that well, that the executive may be looking to withdraw some money from the company and looking for, or a certain kind of invoice or certain types of thing, and that gives that opportunity there. So there's so they're looking for those kinds of events, is the point I'm making there. And so we're that's what the exploit would be. If they were to, the persistence is that's the command and control side of it, which means that they've gotten into your a vulnerable machine. It could be somebody who may have clicked on an email attachment, which then opened up or released a program on their computer, which would then allow the attacker to get notified that this tool had been clicked on, and they got the ability to open up a backdoor communications back to the threat actor. And at that point, then they're able to what we call pop a shell, or basically from that point, they can actually open up a window to see what they have access to now on that person's computer, to see what they're doing. And actually, a lot of times it may even be as you are browsing from screen to screen or operation to operation on your laptop, and then maybe you might notice a little lag or something. But either way, that potentially is a screen pop to where they would be able to see and potentially go through and run certain kinds of commands or scripts to exploit your environment. And the last thing that they're looking to do there is to collect the data. What they're looking for is they're looking at, like, where is your crown jewels? What is the types of data that you are using, and of what value is out there, so they can then turn around and exfiltrate that data and move it to some other place, to where they can then release a ransomware to give you guys a notice that, hey, you've been victimized, and now that you take notice, I'm also going to let you know that I've taken out a bunch of your data, and I'm now going to release it to the world and give all this information out there on the dark web, that these are all the people's data records. And unless I will not do that, unless you decide that you will pay this ransom amount and go through that process of doing that. So how do we help this industry to help protect? And I ran across this graphic, which was something that was like, this is very eye-opening. Is that what this means is that these are all of the kinds of things that we are doing in order to protect the infrastructure and protect the data. And part of what's being shown here is that not only are these the kinds of things that we're doing as cybersecurity professionals, but inside of each one of these boxes are the vendors that produce the kinds of products that are for the different areas of which are outlined here. And these are just some of the ones that are out there that we're able to grab, or able to see that we got from the this picture depicting all the different things. So this is where it is a challenge for us in cybersecurity to determine exactly all the areas of protection that we're trying to do, and use the different kinds of tools that not only are potentially independent from each other, and then sit in front of those to get all the different kinds of alerts and notifications that may come from all the different ones that are inside of each one of those ones, depending upon what we've deployed and what we put into our infrastructure to make that. So it's a lot of work is a whole big point. So I ran across that. I thought that would be fun to kind of share with you that again, these are just some of the ones that are out there. Okay, so data breaches, it's kind of a scary thing if that ever happened to you. You know, it's potentially very damaging to the company. And so again, that quote right there, 54% of companies have experienced one or more cyber attacks in the last 12 months. And not only that, that's an accurate number, because again, I went and checked last night if that was still an accurate one as far as the percentage goes. But that's just the ones that have experience, that have notified or been allowing people to know and that they have had a breach. There's many more companies that have not even shared the information that they have experienced a breach. So the number actually is a lot higher than 54%. This just happens to be the ones that have reported it in the past 12 months. So yeah, so we're looking at that. It's actually, the number would be a lot higher if there's a way for everybody, just as it was able to, you know, be clearer that they had some level of breach on that. And then also they're costly. Again, the average cost of cyber attacks on small businesses is $380,000, and that's just not the initial impact of the issue. This is a longer event that occurs, because you've got to be able to do a lot of things with, depending on the kind of data that you are managing and you are working with. There are different kinds of compliance and regulatory fines and fees that come along with that handling of that data, that if it was to be released, you've got those kinds of things that you have to then pay out for. But then also you have to continuously protect the users that you have, or the clients, if you have client information. You got to protect their credit for a duration of time. Usually I've seen it anywhere from 12 months, and some even taking a little bit longer, but to basically, you know, help block their credit so that it doesn't get, the information gets out and somebody can then use that to do some identification fraud type stuff. But it also means that you have to be able to staff up for the communications that are going to be inbound from all the clients that you have that are wondering, what is it, my information that got released, and how are you going to protect it? Or maybe not. Maybe it wasn't just the entire set of clients that you had. Maybe it was a smaller subset that the breach may have occurred. But either way, it's a costly event to go through all that. And I think the other thing that I didn't put a stat up on there is that, oh, quick pause, another polling question that just popped in. So go ahead and jump on that. The other thing I wanted to mention there that I didn't put on that was that roughly around also 60% of small businesses that have suffered some type or has been victimized by with a data breach, they go out of business. So that is a true fact that they're seeing it, and usually they go out of business like within 6 months, because they just can't recoup from this kind of a situation. So that's also a very unfortunate number there. All right, so some of the other stats, because I like the stats, some of the other stats out there that are on here that I'll just leave up there for a couple seconds there. And the other one I want to mention is that there's also the average records as far as fines go, the different kinds of records that are being taken, or data records are being taken, but the actual fines that are associated with that, be that financial records, PHI, PII, all these different kinds of records that are out there that the threat actors are after. But usually what happens is that, what I'm getting to is that the average cost for those fines is about $150 a record. So you figure out how many records you hold for client data you may have, and then you multiply it by $150, and that's usually what you're going to end up paying for in fines, depending upon if it's health records or like financial records, and there's several other categories as well. But the average cost is $150 a record, and an average is $400 a record just in healthcare. So very, very heavy set of fines, and then also the value set. So in the dark web, they actually do have a price structure that's out there that the different kinds of records that people happen to have or be able to obtain, they can then put them into this dark web commodities market, to where a financial record right now for like a credit card is running about $75 a record, whereas the healthcare records, they're also looking at those as being closer to the 150 to 200, and it floats different types of records that are coming into that commodities market type thing for them on the threat web, on the dark web. But just to let you know that's what motivates these folks to go through and see what they can do to gather that information and gather that data. All right, so some of the things that you can do to help get prepared for that, we're seeing some things in the savings that we've seen something like 3.29 million or $3.29 million dollars is what it takes for a company that has a team to be ready to perform the activities necessary in being able to recover using an incident response plan or the predefined set of instructions on how to be able to recover quickly in the event that they do have an incident, versus a 5.29 million for the incident with no plan or team in effect for that. And then the other question to come up with that is that, so how about business continuity plans and disaster recovery plans? So do you all have that in place? I mean, that's something that's really important, that in the event that you lose when the attacker gets in and they do something in here, you may have, the fact is that you may lose part of your business. So what does your continuity plan look like just for the business opportunities, for the things you've got there? And then if they do enough destruction in the attack, you may find that you may have to invoke your disaster recovery plan, which means you're going to evacuate from the server rack or the systems you may already have running because they're totally damaged. And instead, you may have to fall back to a second location. So you need to make sure your plans are in place to be able to handle those things when that incident occurs. And then the overall cost for, I mentioned that the spend right there, 40% less on data breaches is also important. All right, so let's move to the next one, best practices. So in the best practices, these are some of the items that was able to formulate around creating the things you need around getting better prepared for that in the event that you do have a situation. So first of all, you need a sound cybersecurity program which identifies and assesses the internal and external cybersecurity risks that may threaten the confidentiality, the integrity, and availability of stored non-public information. Under the program, the organization fully implements well-documented information security policies, procedures, guidelines, and standards to protect the security of the IT infrastructure and data stored on the systems. A prudently designed program that you build will provide the protection, it will protect the infrastructure, information systems, and the information in the systems from unauthorized access, use, or other malicious acts by enabling the organization to identify the risks to the assets, the information, and systems. They'll be able to protect each of the necessary assets and the data systems. Also be able to detect, respond to cybersecurity events, recover from the event, potentially disclose the event as appropriate, and restore normal operations in the services. So you need to be able to establish a strong security policies and procedures and guidelines, like I just mentioned, as well as your standards that meet the criteria that has been approval by your senior leadership. You should be able to review at least annually with updates as needed. So terms are effectively explained to the users. That way everybody understands what these policies and procedures are. And usually I've seen that in annualized security and privacy training that helps to help everybody understand about these are the policies that we have that are in place. And then also you need to be able to review, it should be reviewed by independent third-party audit who confirms the compliance of what it is that you've said you've done to actually how it's being conducted and how it's being done. So that way they can actually see it being performed. And then a documentation of particular frameworks used to assess the security of its systems and practices. All right, and so some of these, for the formal and effective policies, procedures governing, so some of the areas of where you want to have policies, procedures are for like data governance and classification. You should be seeing something like access controls, identity management, business continuity, disaster recovery. So these are some of the more policies that help to make sure you've got things set up in your infrastructure for policies. The configuration management policy, asset management policy, risk, data disposal, incident response. I can go on and on. There's a bunch here. I could just keep going on and on about them, but there's a great set of policies that are out there that can you can link out to. I put the link there. SANS organization has a good set of just template policies, and they've got them broken down by the size of the company that you are, that it can also help you identify what those policies that you should have. So that way you've got at least something to start from to go through and look at that. So those are the set of formalized policies. The other one is third-party assessments and audits. Should have something ready to go and lined up with that. So that way a risk assessment is an effort to identify, estimate, and prioritize information system risks. For IT threats are constantly changing. So it's important to design a manageable, effective risk assessment schedule. Organizations should codify the risk assessment scope, methodology, and frequency. A risk assessment should identify, assess, and document how identified cybersecurity risks or threats are evaluated and categorized. You establish the criteria for the effectiveness of it, and then also a reliable annual third-party audit of security controls needs to be put in place. So not only are they looking at seeing what you currently have written about, but actually how you are demonstrating that the controls are actually how you're doing that. All right. Clearly defined and assigned information security roles and responsibilities. So you need to make sure you've got really good definitions around who specifically are doing what type things inside of the organization that becomes what's known as your security operations type of stuff. Strong controls, so strong access control procedures. So you need to make sure that you've got plenty of documentation and that you can actually perform for around access control, which is a method of guaranteeing that users are who they say they are, and that they have the appropriate access to IT systems and data. It mainly consists of two components, the authentication and authorization. So some of those, for those areas of best practices for the authentication and authorization is around access to systems, assets, and associated facilities to limit the authorized users, processes, devices, activities, and transactions. Also for access privileges. And then we have access privileges are reviewed at least every 3 months, and accounts are disabled and or deleted in accordance with the policy. That way, if you are ensuring that the user accounts that potentially somebody has been offboarded, that their full user authorities and account authorities that were tied to their accounts has been removed, disabled in some method, so that way you can ensure that that there isn't an opportunity for someone else to come along and pick up that user account and do something that may be of some level of authority that they could do. So all employees use unique, complex passwords. Big thing now, multi-factor authentication is used wherever possible, especially to access the internal networks from an external network, unless a documented exception exists based on the use of a similar effective access control method. So even with all these policies, there are the opportunities for creating exceptions. And when the exceptions, as long as they're noted and tracked, potentially that, because you may find that you have a situation where you may not be able to implement the full control, and you may have a system or a process that can't take advantage of, say, multi-factor authentication, but it should be in place. So then what you would need to do is, well, it will be available once a said vendor makes this new update or upgrade, or once I updated or upgraded my environment component. But until then, I can't run that. And so you have to go through and actually create a quick little exception that would go through and again, haven't documented as to why you haven't done it and when you're going to do it. So that way you can then follow up, make sure it gets done. And then also the last item there is like, confirm the identity of the authorized recipient of the funds. For example, if they're trying to send information from funds from one to another, that there's a way to authorize the recipient of that. This is why a multi-factor authentication is really important there. Data security. So assets of data stored in the cloud or managed by a third-party service provider are subject to appropriate security reviews and independent security assessments. Cloud computing presents many unique security issues and challenges, because in the cloud, data is stored with a third-party provider and accessed over the internet. This means visibility and control over the data is limited. Organizations must understand the security posture of the cloud service provider in order to make sound decisions on using the services. Best practices will include requiring a risk assessment of third-party service provider, defining your minimum security practices for third-party services provider, periodically assessing third-party service providers based on potential risk, ensuring that the guidelines and contractual protections are minimally addressed for the following with a third-party service provider access control policies and procedures that you should have in place. They also to include the multi-factor authentication for them. Third-party providers provide encryption. They have encryption policies and procedures, and then also notifications protocol for a cybersecurity event, which directly impacts the customer's information systems and non-public information. And then encryption of sensitive data stored in transit. So again, we've been tackling that as well. So that makes sure that the data encryption can protect non-public information. A system should implement current prudent standards for encryption keys, message authentication, and hashing to protect the confidentiality and integrity of the data at rest or in transit. The training and education is really important as well, to ensure that cyber awareness training is conducted at least annually for all employees and updated to reflect risk identified by the most recent risk assessment. Employees are often an organization's weakest link for cybersecurity. A comprehensive cybersecurity awareness program sets clear cybersecurity expectations for all employees and educates everyone to recognize attack vectors, help prevent cyber-related incidents, and respond to a potential threat. Since identity theft is a leading cause of fraudulent distributions, it should be considered a key topic of training, which should focus on current trends to exploit unauthorized access to systems. Be on the lookout for individuals falsely posing as authorized plan officials and participants and beneficiaries. All right. The next one here we have is secure software development. So for that arena, we're talking about the SDLC. So a secure SDLC process ensures that that security assurance activities such as penetration testing, code review, and architectural analysis are an integral part of the systems development effort. best practices for this is to ensure that you have appropriate procedures, guidelines, and standards which ensure any in-house applications are developed securely. This would include such protections as configuring system alerts to trigger when an individual's account information has been changed, requiring additional validation if personal information has been changed prior to request for a distribution from a plan account, requiring additional validation from distributions other than a rollover of the entire balance of the participant's account. Procedures for evaluating or testing the security of externally developed applications, including periodic reviews and updates, as well as a vulnerability management plan, including regular vulnerability scans, annual pen testing as well, particularly with respect to customer-facing applications. A business resilience program which effectively addresses business continuity, disaster recovery, and incident response. Business resilience is the ability for an organization has quickly adapt to distribution while maintaining continuous business operations and safeguarding people, assets, and data. The business continuity plan is a written set of procedures an organization follows for recovery, resume, and maintain business functions and their underlying processes, acceptable predefined levels following a disruption. And then a disaster recovery plan is the document process to recover and resume an organization's IT infrastructure, business applications, and data services in the event of a major disruption. Whereas an incident response plan is a set of instructions to help IT staff detect, respond to, and recover from security-related incidences. Our technical controls are implemented for best security practices. Technical security solutions are primarily implemented and executed by the information systems through mechanisms contained in the hardware, software, and firmware components of the system. Best security practices for technical security are to ensure that your hardware, software, and firmware models and versions that are kept up to date. Also to understand is that the vendor-supported firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and prevention appliances and tools are also kept up to date. You have also current and regularly updated antivirus software, the routine patch management, preferably automated, network segmentation. You also have system hardening, and you have routine backup, data backup, again, preferably automated. And the 3-2-1 principle there is the backup strategy simply states that you should have 3 copies of your data, your production data, and 2 backup copies on 2 different media, such as disk or tape, with 1 copy offsite for disaster recovery. So that's the 3-2-1 principle. And then we go into incident response. So this is the when a cybersecurity breach or incident occurs, appropriate action should be taken to protect the plan and the participants. So this may be also including what you would do to informing your law enforcement, notifying the appropriate insurers for investigating the incident, giving affected plans and participants the information necessary to prevent reduce injury, honoring any contractual or legal obligation with respect to the breach, including complying with agreed upon notification requirements and fixing the problems that caused the breach to prevent its reoccurrence. All right, heading in the final stretch here. This is another just a level of diagram that describes a lot of the things in creating a cybersecurity culture. So I just went through a lot of the items that are in there, but I at least want to kind of highlight what those areas are. So first of all, the top one, align with your company culture what is your board of directors and your executives are stating as far as the goals and directions of where the company is going. So for cybersecurity, you need to ensure that you are aligning with that, so that way you're doing the right things around that. So that way the business is not at any risk as well. And then also create policies and plans, procedures, and such. I'm going to move to the next slide to kind of wrap this thing down. So I mentioned about aligning. So there's some aligning frameworks that are out there. So the ones I've highlighted there are pretty common for as far as alignment to different security frameworks out there. Make sure you create your policies, plans, process, and procedures. And then exercise those plans. So in other words, if you haven't got an opportunity to exercise the plan when the time comes to go exercise it, you're potentially not going to be as effective as you believe you could be if you hadn't already exercised it. And it's almost like the marathon type thing. If you decided you wanted to wake up one day and go run a marathon, you're not likely to do really well in that marathon if you just rolled out with no training program at all. So you need to train for that, which is where we're using that analogy, and that you need to be able to train for these kinds of events that go on. And then also audit the review, audit to ensure that you've got the right things in place. Educate, you need to make sure you educate and train folks, make sure that they're getting everything ready to go for the event that you have a situation, but also to make sure they're all aware of what's going on. And then also maintain the continuous maintaining the documentation, looking at what you currently have in the environment to ensure that you've got the right stuff in place. This one here is just a diagram. It provides you with what the stages of what cybersecurity would look like from the foundation, which is your stage 1, which is your foundational security. So these are the things you need to have in place in order to have just a foundation of security. Then on top of that, stage 2, policies and awareness. What are those types of things in that area? Stage 3, the key processes that you need to have in operations in order to make that well. And stage 4 is your incident response plans, getting everything all ready to go. And then stage 5 is how you're monitoring and doing your threat hunting and such. All right, key takeaways here. Some of the ones here that I went ahead and just grabbed and quoted up here. The threat of an incident causing a negative impact to business, brand, and financials is growing daily. Implementing strong cybersecurity policies will lower risk and lessen the impact of the event of a breach. Cybersecurity cultures, organizations, the best focus on best practices, prepare for incidents, and implements proven solutions to prevent cybersecurity attacks. And the last item there is assessing your current state and building out your strategy provides visibility and structure to the cybersecurity program.
All right, guys. Well, I don't see any questions right now, so we are at time. So just thank you all so much for joining us today, and thank you, Dale, for presenting, and we hope to see you guys next time. Have a great day.